Daigneau's Flaming Fish performance models, handmade miniature wooden sailing vessels, on the web at flamingfish.net. Little ships for big kids. Support for Boat Talk also comes from Front Street Shipyard, a Mid-Coast Maine boat building, repair, and storage facility located in Belfast. Front Street Shipyard on Penobscot Bay, offering dockage, service, and amenities for owners, captains, and crew. Online at frontstreetshipyard.com or 930-3740.
Support for WERU comes from Maine Boats, Homes, and Harbors magazine, covering Maine's boats, harbors, arts, and architecture since 1987. Bringing the coast as close as the mailbox. On the web at mainboats.com.
It's 10 o'clock and you are tuned to WERU-FM, 89.9 Blue Hill, 99.9 Bangor, and streaming online everywhere at weru.org. Boat Talk with your hosts Alan Sprague and Mike Joyce is up next.
I survive and sail, sir. I survive the pits of fish and take some home to lie, sir.
Good morning, good morning. It's the second Tuesday of the month, 10 o'clock in the morning here down East Maine anyway. Time for Boat Talk here on Community Radio, WERU-FM, Blue Hill, 89.9, 99.9 in Bangor, and all around the world at weru.org. Boat Talk is a call-in radio show for people contemplating things naval with your rusty anchors, Mike Joyce and Alan Sprague, two old downwind sailors who may be tactless, but then again, we may be jibing you too.
Good one.
Yeah.
I wait just on the edge of my seat for the opening pun. You know, I have nothing to do with it. I would like to disclaim, and that was a good one. So,
we have a variety of issues, little small things to get to before we get to our main subject, which is going to be Hank Halsted. It's going to be fun talking to Hank.
Yeah.
But, you want to go first with the local news?
Yep. Our friend Hank has lived a great life around boats and a lot to talk to there. We also would like to acknowledge Tom Groening this morning. He is in the studio here from the Working Waterfront, the editor of the Working Waterfront, and doing a story about Boat Talk. Good morning, Tom.
That's right. I've been listening to you guys ramble on for all these years and thought it'd be fun to come watch you do the show.
A no-brainer, as they say.
See the floundering firsthand.
Yeah, as I was also just talking to Tom, he's on a long list of people that it's a no-brainer we ought to be talking to and have been thinking about for a long time.
Yep.
Working Waterfront is a very interesting operation, part of the bigger organization there?
The Island Institute.
Island Institute, thank you.
Yeah.
And has just changed helmsman after...
After 30 years, that's right. Philip Conkling and Peter Ralston started 30 years ago, and they both retired recently. And we have a new president named Rob Snyder, and kind of looking at the issues that we get involved with in new ways, and very much in the things that are in the news. Mentioned the story about the ocean acidification. We had testimony yesterday at the legislature about that bill. So we're very much involved in contemporary issues.
Right. You're going to be having a not open to the public workshop on Thursday on ocean acidification. We'd like to hear some of the results from that, too. So we'll put that on our next Boat Talk. But ocean acidification is a real symptom we're having here. Unfortunately, another one we're going to be talking about quickly, too, is dead mud has just come up in the Bangor Daily.
We have told Tom he can chip in at any point sitting here. You might as well speak up if you're interested. Now, a couple little news items here. We like to clear the deck before we get talking to the main subject today. And we told you about the shrimp moratorium last year. Heard another interesting fact about the shrimp moratorium. Our shrimp is a captured population, and it exists uniquely in the Gulf of Maine. And that is, if you look at the map, the big map, you'd think it's open to the open ocean out there. But in fact, it's not. It is closed by Georges Bank on the southern end. And for the rest of the world's shrimp to get into the Gulf of Maine, they have to come across the Gulf Stream and swim over George's Bank, and they ain't going to do it. And if we push our shrimp population to a point where it can't resustain itself, it ain't coming back. So no shrimps this year, and ain't they tasty is most of what people know about shrimp. So speaking of, things is changing, NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, has decided to stop printing government charts.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we did mention this last month too, but yes, it's...
Not sure if we did or not, but the government is going to stop printing charts, and maybe the ones that I've got under the couch cushions are now going to be valuable antiques. Now, there are commercial places that are still going to print charts, the Map Tech people, for instance, the chart kits and all that. You can now navigate. We now navigate up and down the East Coast of North America with an iPhone, pretty much.
Don't say we there, white man.
Yeah, so that's the truth, though, and it alarms me a little bit. All commercial mariners are, by law, you have to carry a paper chart, and every mariner ought to carry a paper chart, but I found myself on boat deliveries without them every once in a while, and that's nuts. So the government's not going to print them anymore, but they're still going to be out there. Another little... thing they have is chart booklets, but as they point out here, there's matters of scale. You can't pull back and get the big picture, and some of these little chart booklets don't even have a compass rose on every page.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So maybe not as much information as you want. Tricky business.
Yeah.
Here's a good one from our friends at the Front Street Shipyard down in Belfast, and they are going gangbusters down there. I think the business model is great. They're going for the big boats, and there is a lot of work and money there. They have just formed a partnership with, we'll get to the name of these guys in just a minute, Mattingly from Trefoil Marine, and they are going to build catamaran patrol craft for security in the world's harbors.
Yeah, fast patrol, too.
50-knot patrol craft. They're going to mount weapons. They're going to be very electronically enhanced, and they're going to also be very pricey. But apparently there's a great need for these, and they're talking about pumping out a couple of dozen of these a year starting this spring and possibly hiring 10 to 12 new people to do so. They've got 100-odd people working down there now.
Yeah.
Yeah. The same people, Trefoil Marine, is also retaining Front Street Shipyard, who the two principals there have been doing business for years and all kinds of different incarnations. They're also going to build 3 water taxis and a 45-foot limousine boat for use in the 215 Pan American Games in Toronto, among other projects. So
we'll have to see if we can get ourselves a little perk and have a ride on one of those fast boats. It'd be a fun trip. Probably take about, 4 minutes?
Well, like I say, I like I'm a new fan of catamarans. I got a little sailing catamaran, a 50-knot cat. That gets my
Ever
attention.
since that catamaran April Fool's lobster boat thing, you've been a fan.
Yeah. Well, I like I say, found one on the side of the road and have learned to love it. We talked to a fellow named Franklin Pierce a few years back.
Yeah,
and
local boy turned good.
Yeah, he's an underwater archaeologist, and he told us on a Boat Talk issue a while back about some prehistoric tools that were found on a shallow spot in the mouth of Bass Harbor in a scallop drag. Mm-hmm. And Alan and I held this stone adze in our hands, and we're both woodworkers, and we both got chills holding this thing. Looks like a rock, but it ain't.
Yeah, you fit it in your hand just right. It's an amazing tool. It fits perfectly in the palm of your hand and has a very nice sharp edge at the other end.
One of my little favorites comes through the library is the Maine Archaeological Society Bulletin, and in this fall 2013, 3 prehistoric lithic tools recovered by fishermen off the Maine coast, Franklin Price and Arthur Spees. There's more of the same, and they also reference the tools that we talked about found off of Bass Harbor. If you ever come across Maine Archaeological Society Bulletin, you could Google it or find it at the library.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
All right.
Got one more for you, and this one blew me away. I saw it on Entertainment Tonight.
Really?
A boat story.
Huh.
And it was about the Bay of Fundy, and it blew me away. The Bay of Fundy is now the hottest surf spot in the world.
Whoa, yeah. I've seen that tidal bore come in. You're right. It's, wow.
Yeah. Now, up
I'd
to
be scared.
Moncton, New Brunswick, which is you drive by it on the Trans-Canada, you wouldn't see it as a seaport. It's way up the Petitcodiac River, and it's marsh flatlands up there, okay? And it's not, it's not a real dramatic piece of land.
So
but
they're
that's
surfing up the river or the bay?
They surf up the river.
Okay.
And you come up the Petitcodiac River. In 2010, they took out a dam across a causeway. And this has enhanced the tidal bore, which comes up that river. And as the tide funnels up into the little tiny end of the river there, it makes a standing wave. And it goes for 29 kilometers is the new record. Two guys from California came out this fall and surfed 29 miles. They did it standing up, sitting down, laying down, and they said it is a tricky piece of water. Okay, very, very powerful.
And
chocolate brown, full of silt, a little bit polluted, and death rocks right next to. He says we've been doing this our whole lives, and it was all we could handle. But people have been flocking to the Petitcodiac River, and there's one guy, Melvin Perez, a local fella. He claims the new record. He surfed the wave 40 times as of Christmas or so. He claims the number record, and Melvin puts a good little note on it, too. He says, if you get the wave, it's great, but if you miss it, it's not like you wait for the next one. You have to come back tomorrow.
That's right.
It's the leading edge of the tidal bore. If you missed it, you have to stay on the edge of that wave. And again, the newest hot surf spot in the world, Petitcodiac River, Moncton, New Brunswick. Go figure.
Wonder if you can catch it going back out, too.
Good question.
Yeah.
Good question. That's most of what I got.
Okay. I'm going to go back to shrimp then again, too. The Natural Resources Defense Council, the federal outfit, is pushing for what we've been talking about for a long time, and is supporting local marine fisheries. Turns out that when you buy a can of tuna fish now, you see that dolphin safe sign on the side of it. That's because they've passed a law that fish caught should be caught in a sustainable or at least a friendly way to marine mammals.
We're trying to bring Maine lobster that way now.
Right. Well, supposedly the law also says that fish imported from foreign countries also have to stand by this rule too, and they're not. Yeah, they're not. It's just being let go slack. So the the Natural Resources Defense Council, NRDC. Go to that website and check it out. They're starting a petition to pressure our legislators to stand by the word and make sure that law is enforced, and that all these marine mammals aren't just getting turned into bycatch.
Kind of like making sausage. Don't know how close you want to look at that.
Well, we can try to make it better. Just letting it go slack is.
But I guess the point would be that it's kind of you would have to just figure that there are a lot of bad things going on, fishery practices worldwide.
Right. Yeah. Well, basically, what we're trying to say is try to shop local when it comes to seafood here.
Yep.
And there's a little side thing too. I was, as you were saying, with shrimp. Really like shrimp, so I bought some frozen shrimp and was trying to buy local as I could. And the bag said North American shrimp, so I bought that 2-pound bag and brought it home. And while I was cooking half of it, I turned down in the very bottom corner. It says "Product of Vietnam, farm raised."
Neat.
Yeah.
Wow.
North American shrimp.
Little ones or big ones? Big ones.
They were big ones. Yeah.
Yeah. They ain't right anyway.
Yeah. They broil a lot easier than the small ones.
There you go.
So that is the last thing, except for Bangor Daily News, and I'll let people look at this up in the Bangor Daily News. The BDN has an article on dead mud. I hadn't heard that term before now, but I guess it's pretty easy to understand what's happening with the ocean acidification and green crabs probably also too. A lot of dead mud is turning up along the Maine coast.
It has no oxygen in it, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's part of it. It's also being acidified.
Yeah, because otherwise it's a lively zone.
Well,
it's kind of like the soil. Yeah,
should be. Yeah, the green crab infestation is pulling a lot of the plants out that grow in these mud flats too, and they're the plants are part of the ecology that keeps that viable.
It's not just our Constitution that has a genius for checks and balances. It's nature as well. And if you mess up the little balances, I'm thinking the checks, get right out of control fairly easily. And the little ice storm we just had with the hurting it put on our woods, Let's imagine an early spring and then another storm and, some not healthy trees and then a bug comes. It gets out of control fast.
Yep.
So.
So anyway, check out the Bangor Daily News for information on dead mud. And that brings us up to Hank Halsted, I believe.
All right. We are doing Boat Talk this morning, and we love doing it. And we've been looking forward to talking to our friend Hank Halsted for years.
Yep.
And
it's a call-in show, too. Anybody else would like to contribute, you could write down this number, 1-866-625-9378. This is Boat Talk on Community Radio, WERU. And let's see if Hank is there. Good morning, Hank. Are you with us?
Good morning, Michael. Good morning, Ellen. How are you guys today?
Oh, we're doing well.
Great, Hank.
Welcome to Boat Talk, Hank.
Well, thanks. It's great to be here. And, thanks for having me aboard.
Hank, Alan, and I all met at the Hinckley Company back in the mid-'80s. And, we've all since gone off in other directions. And Hank is now principal of Northrop Johnson, a yacht brokerage down in Newport, Rhode Island, among other places around the world. Hank, we got what we call the Boat Talk question. It works for just about everybody. What happened to you when you was a kid messed you all up about boats?
You was born that way.
Basically so. Didn't have any chance to fall on my head. I was sort of dropped in the water. Day I was born, we were actually out cruising on a Hinckley 34 in those days and sailing from Connecticut to Long Island every weekend. And my mom started screaming for pickles and ice cream one morning in August. The old man had to row like heck. Rowed her ashore, borrowed a car, drove into New York City, and that's where I got born. So you might say it's in my blood.
I would say so.
And got to grow up with a boat in the family.
It was, we sort of, pretty amazing in those days, actually, because they spent 3 nights a week on a Hinckley 34 with 2 cabins, raised 3 kids. I think it had about 10 gallons of pumped cold water. Some of my earliest memories are sitting there tiny in the dinghy watching these rusty ice tongs come down and lift these huge things of ice up aboard. It was pretty rudimentary. When you really look back at that, I guess it's my mom who gets the credit because she put up with a lot, huh?
Mm.
Hank, if your dad was spending so much time on his boat, can't we identify that as that's his happy spot, right?
Oh, without a doubt.
And isn't that why we work in boats?
You know what? How lucky are we when you really cut to the chase? I mean, we could be, I don't know, there's a lot of things I could be doing, but sitting here in Newport looking out across the harbor, pretty much just about where I belong.
Yeah.
What was your dad's business?
He actually worked for Colgate-Palmolive.
Yeah.
He was purchasing agent for those guys. He commuted 5 days a week on the train into Manhattan.
Sitting on the train.
Himself off with 3 nights a week, sleeping on his boat.
Sitting on the train, thinking about the boat.
Exactly the case.
Yeah.
And they tried to get me to follow that route. Gave me the willies. So I ended up, as you know, living with you guys in Maine for 15 years, and pretty much always on the coast, except for a 12-year stint in Colorado, way back. And
again, we. I kind of think of it as a effort not to grow up enjoying the real world, and it's not just a job and an adventure as well. Every day of my life. I mean, I can't think of anything else that I was really cut out to do. And the good news here is I still get to do a ton of sailing, get to make a reasonable living barefoot. Get to eat a fair share of salt through the course of the year in various oceans of the world. It's a whole lot of fun each and every day. And I think I might be otherwise unemployable. I can't imagine what I'd do. The allure of the sea, of course, is, the basic of the whole boat talk thing. But I call it church, Hank. What is it that is so compelling from your point of view out there in the Big Blue? What's the Big Blue mean to you?
Big Blue means to me being far at sea where the closest land is 6 miles down. I've been fortunate enough to do a lot of single-handed sailing, still do a lot of double-handed sailing, and there's nothing nicer than consecutive days spent offshore with the elements. The sun comes up in the morning, goes down at night, stars come up, they go down. You get into this marvelous rhythm of living with the elements. And the good voyages, when I got time, I still shoot stars and do some real navigation. And yeah, it is just, it takes you back to the rudiments, and it's pretty elemental living. Very much the antithesis of what's going on these days with everybody being sort of plugged in, doing texting and blah, 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 it's, for me, unconnected is highly sacred space and becoming more so. Huh, you guys?
It takes a day or so to shed the real world when you go offshore, I find, and it also takes a day or so when you get home. Everything looks kind of stupid, and then after a day or so, it looks right again, you know. You find that as well?
It is amazing to me, you know, how much baggage I can carry in my head as I head offshore, and it's even more marvelous how quickly you shed it, and how it actually, as you say, when you get back ashore, there's a bit of peace that just sort of sticks with you until you build up that baggage trust again, you know?
It's an elemental place that has its own attraction, but it's also a place that rewards good behavior, you know. You can always be learning. Seamanship is like a trade, you know. If you're doing it right, you can always learn a new trick of the trade. And it's just inherently rewarding, too, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. No, when you say elemental, it's astounding to me, and particularly in sailing shorthanded, I venture to say I never act with such deliberation as when I'm sailing alone on a boat out of sight of land. It leaves you marvelously responsible for each and every one of your actions. One hand for the ship, you betcha. You know what they say about the guys that they find floating who fell overboard, or I guess, and it's sort of a funny one because I was one of the last ones to grow up enough to use safety harnesses quite enough. Remember, there's an old guy, you probably remember, Francis Stokes was one of the very early single-handers. I don't know if I can say this on the radio, but Francis and I weren't very often, you know, we were sort of the last to hook on. He looked at me one day and said, you know, it's very likely that my last words on this planet will be, oh, crap.
That's what I worry about.
Yeah.
Watching the boat go away some night, yeah.
Yeah. There's a large number of men have fallen overboard that are found with their flies open.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about single-handed sailing. You do a lot of it, and you have won the Bermuda 1-2 race, among other things, which you sail down single-handed and come back with another person. That's nuts, sailing by yourself in the middle of the ocean, especially racing to drive a boat like that.
It certainly puts you in charge of your world and responsible for everything that happens. But as challenging as it is, and it is, you know, the race to Bermuda is basically a 100-hour sprint, and the guys who can stay awake the longest and stick to it and keep their focus sharpest are the guys that win. I was lucky to do it twice and win it twice. Way back in my youth, back in the early 90s. And it is, that's, you know, there just aren't words for it. It takes sailing to the very highest levels of the sport, because you are responsible for everything that happens. You drive yourself to and beyond the point of exhaustion, and it really puts you into another sort of kind of awareness, where, you know, boy, it's hard to describe the exhaustion. I guess after my first race, I ran into some friends down there. They took me out to dinner, and I was so tired I kept fallen asleep while I was talking, and I'd sort of switch into my dream and give them about 2 paragraphs out of my dream and then wake up again and leave these guys just so confused. But no, it truly, you push and then you push a little harder, but you always have to keep watching for your limits. And I did have, I had one circumstance in that first race on the Hinkley. It was blowing about 35, and I still had the spinnaker up, and I had to get it down. And the boat wasn't doing so well at steering itself because it was completely overpowered. And I sort of had to fight my way to the foredeck, and I tried to pull the spinnaker down, and the bucket just wouldn't move. There was so much pressure in it. I had to quick hook up a block and lead a block to the windlass. It actually took the power of the windlass to get the sock down over the spinnaker.
Whoa.
Good thinking.
Only did a little bit of damage to the aft tow rail, but that was after being awake and steering for about 30 hours. Good news was I won the race. But yeah, we pushed it in those days. I don't think I'd do that anymore.
That's a good little trick of the trade right there, the windlass. I like that. Winning a race, people, I'm thinking, don't just happen to win races. What's the difference between winning a race and just showing up?
Focus.
Yeah.
Never let up. Here's an interesting one that I've used on people in the crude Bermuda race. And the fact of the matter is, okay, this is a 600-mile race to Bermuda, roughly. 100-hour race at 6 knots. I'd venture to say if you take one fat guy from the leeward side of the boat and you make him sleep on the windward side of the boat, it'll probably make a difference of maybe 2/100ths of a knot. Frankly, 2/100ths of a knot in the Bermuda race is 20 minutes. In the top 5 places of that race are always within that same 20 minutes. If you distill this back down to the rudiments, it means there are only probably 2 entities on this planet that really can appreciate 2/100ths of a knot. One being ants, and the other one being sailors.
Yeah, details, right? And detail and drive.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was John Marshall's snowflake theory. You know, each one, they're beautiful, they're unique, they're tiny, and you can barely focus on them.
Yeah.
Pile them up, and you get a heart attack shovel on them.
Hank, we all met at the Hinckley Company back in the mid-'80s. When I got there, Henry Hinckley had just gone off. You worked for him for a little while. Tell us something about Henry, the real Henry Hinckley.
You know, in truth, I was well acquainted with Henry, but actually Steve Kaiser, one of our associates there, he was Henry's captain. I sort of knew him. We were well acquainted, but I never really worked with him. I can say he was a gruff old guy who knew exactly how it ought to happen. He was an autocrat. And when Henry said jump, people would answer on the way down.
Autocrat, I like that.
But it's very funny. I mean, I think one of his priceless lines that has withstood the test of time, people would come in, look around and say, geez, Mr. Hinckley, it's quite an operation. How many people you got working there?
Yeah, I've heard this
Wouldn't
one.
miss a beat. He'd say, oh, about half.
Yeah.
That went over well with the workers.
Oh, yeah. Well, we were all some of them. But no, he was, he's a guy who really, he made a mark in the yachting business, and he did it not only with design when he came out, it wasn't, the B-40 wasn't his design. That was a consortium of 8 really smart boat owners who said they wanted the best built for them. But they fundamentally took him to Trip Design. They resolved it between, I guess, the 9 of them at that point. But then for him to stop his production line, take on this entirely new material, and really do that level of innovation, and when you get down to it, that's the core of the American spirit. That's what's driven our industry through the roof at all turns. He was a real pioneer that way, and that really is what, his wooden boats were good, but not the very best in the world. As soon as he got into fiberglass, he really was, he was cutting new cloth, and that was really to be admired.
The Hinckley Bermuda 40 is why I'm sitting here this morning, Hank. We lucked into a little wooden sailboat when we were kids, fixed it up in the barn, watched it leak, kept it out to Cousins Island down in Casco Bay, sailed around. We were into a handy boat one day, and there was a Hinckley at the dock, and we were, oh my God. And the people on the B-40 saw a boat full of boys, and they had us aboard for peanut butter and banana sandwiches. And I never forgot that, you know.
I'll be darned. You still doing the peanut butter and banana?
Oh, geez. Like I say, and go for a ride on a B-40 anytime anybody would have me, so... But that's how I got my connection to the Hinckley Company. And
Hank, you mentioned that Henry was a designer too, which is true. He actually was an engineer from Cornell when he came out of school. I don't know if you're aware of that or this or not, but he designed the 34 that you spent your first years on. That was a Henry Hinckley design.
Yeah, that's. I wasn't aware that was his boat. But,
yep.
I wouldn't doubt it. She was actually. Excuse me. She was a little fractional rig and actually a great sailing boat.
The Hinckley Company. I'm sorry.
Okay. What happened? You may not be aware of this either. Later on, the 34s were redesigned into a 36, and the Hinckley 36 was what Henry was actually starting to make first in fiberglass. He started to make a plug for the 36 when the group called the Oldak Group, who ordered the 8 original B-40s, came along, and the 36 project went on the back burner. So
was that 36? Did it have a bit of a little higher house?
Yes, it had a step cabin. That's right. The 36.
I've seen a couple of those. No, yeah, they're sweet boats, actually. They really are.
Yeah, he actually had one built for himself. One of those was the very first Jan that Henry had made for himself.
When I landed at the Hinckley Company, I ended up on the production line, and I spent about 2 years there, and I kept looking down at the dock where all the real boats were with actual people on them, you know, and got myself into the service department. You were a service manager there, and that is direct and repair of boats. You learn a lot about boats by fixing them, don't you?
Don't you? You know, it's funny because I had been a delivery captain for years prior to that. So basically, I was pretty good at breaking them too. But it was actually a very good experience. And it does. Being service manager and dealing with all of the problems that consistently happen on boats is some of the best training you'll ever get, even when you go 360 and go back out again as a seaman. I learned a ton there looking at how you guys put these boats together and held the boats together. It's amazing what a good education being a service manager is, because you sort of thinking on your feet and you're answering questions as they come to you. It's a really fun thing to do. Having
been a delivery captain, a charter captain, a service manager, being a boat broker after that's quite a trifecta.
It was a lot of fun. Actually, one of the things I miss a lot now, because my job sort of evolved, as you're aware, you know, from we did the service, then we did the brokerage, and also had a good hand in selling a lot of new boats, and got a lot of input on some of the design as we would get the boats built. That, too, is an awful lot of fun to apply your knowledge, you know, just how you live at sea, and get to have a little input on how new boats are designed, and deal with some of the problems that arise when you are at sea. But,
one of the themes that we like to reiterate on Boat Talk is that, there's a couple. One, you ain't got time to make all those mistakes yourself, so you got to profit from the mistakes of other people. But also, the whole boating thing's about dreams. You know, we try to ascribe great things and some stupid things that happen around boats to dreams, but it's about dreams, isn't it?
Absolutely, unequivocally true. I mean, here I run a reasonably successful yacht brokerage down here in Newport, and we got boats listed all over the world. And I'm going to say this on the radio. There is absolutely no financial sense to any of this. This is entirely a business of passion and dream. But then again, what's life? Life is all about. If life ain't about passion and dream, you might say that you ain't living it.
with thinking of your dad sitting on the train again, thinking about the boat.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely the case.
Yeah.
But the only sad thing for me is you go into any kind of hard times, and when there isn't plenty of money around, this is certainly the money that dries up quickest because, yes, in many ways, and in a very absolute sense of the term, I'm a dream merchant. Only one problem with that is my stock and trade is dreamers. I consider that an asset because, in truth, it is, at the end of the day, what gives life value.
Anything besides scale and detail different between the guy dreaming of a dinghy or a mega yacht?
You know what? And this is really another magnificent oxymoron. You know, I've been lucky enough to spend a lot of time at the helm nowadays of 150, 200-foot boats on the race course, which is pretty exciting, put your heart in your throat. But, you know, the bigger the boat, the farther you are from the water.
Yep.
And if you want to go sailing, take out a hair-shaft-haired tow dish, and you'll be having the time of your life, and you will really be sailing. Magnificent. I was lucky enough to spend 10 months on a Concordia yawl when I was about 23, 24 years old. Those boats ain't fast. 5 3/4 knots, boy, you're ripping right along. But darn, you're sailing. You know, you're 3 feet from the water, and you are involved deep in the spirit of and sport of sailing.
The feedback loop, we call it. And again, let's simplify it down to butt, boat, paddle. We got a kayaker sitting at the end of the table here, you know. About as pure as it gets.
Well, basically the feedback is salt in your face. But then again, that means that you are into the sport.
Just read a description of a big boat race where there were computers everywhere, and it was Tom Jackson from Wooden Boat Magazine talking about how the computers were facing in every direction. They even had 3D modeling of the Gulf Stream as they crossed it, and he looked down, looked up, and at one point, everybody's head was in a computer screen. There was nobody,
without a doubt.
Nobody looking up, sailing the boat, looking at the fog, looking at the water. Everybody had their head in the screen. He thought it was just slightly surreal. Now these big boats, Hank, they let's imagine two kinds of big boats. Modern rig like Scheherazade, for instance, 154 feet, a yawl, a big main, a big jib, a little mizzen. Some of these boats are very traditional, though, with lots of sails. Schooner topsail rigs, whatever, but lots and lots of sails, right?
Two absolutely different kettles of fish. I was lucky enough to sit at the helm of Scheherazade. I got to drive her around at the Super Yacht Regatta in Palma 8 or 9 years ago. And also got to sail, actually, I did a New York Yacht Club cruise aboard the 1914 Herreshoff schooner Mariette. Mariette, we sailed with 31 cadets aboard.
Huh.
And there was, I think every one of their names was Handy Billy.
No electric winches.
Actually, she had 2.
Ooh.
That was it. But, I mean, she was literally, we set the main top before we left the mooring in Camp, in Camden, any harbor we left. And, I mean, it was just remarkably hands-on, and the choreography on that boat was magic. Likewise, I sailed a bit on Eleonora, another Herreshoff boat. And, you go by these boats at nighttime with the lights on, the rigging, and these boats are literally raining, running rigging, halyards and lazy jacks and this, that, and the other. There's a lot of line, a lot of windage just in a line. On the other hand, driving some of these Perini navies around the track, 56 meters, 160 feet, something like that. Everything is on a captive reel winch. These things have really revolutionized sailing. They're really right out of the fishing industry. But everything, the biggest problem there is the crowd at the console in front of my helm. Because when you're easing the general to tack and easing the staysail, unless it takes 5 or 6 guys with their hands on the levers, you're trying to wedge yourself in the middle of just, please, can I hold on the steering wheel for a minute, guys? It gets pretty outrageous. funny thing is, in big boats, and as we, more and more we take them out on the racetrack, it's a little spooky. I mean, it takes for normal port starboard tack situation. It takes us on a Perini Navy 150-footer. It takes 2 minutes not to tack. It takes 2 minutes just to roll the sails and head upwind. At 10 knots, 90 seconds is a quarter mile, which means you're talking a half a mile just to turn or stop. So when you drive these things, it's real exciting, and your heart lives in your throat. But you got to be, if you're not a half a mile ahead of yourself, you will be in trouble.
And again, powerful forces on all those sails and lines.
Huge forces. You're talking, 500-ton vessels traveling at 10 to 15 knots. Yeah, it's exciting. However, it's even more exciting to get in a laser and go eat some salt.
Yep. Now, again, let's go right back to the mega yachts just for a second here. One thing I'd like to point out with these mega yachts, you don't just buy a boat, you buy a whole institution. You need crew, you need infrastructure. When you kind of buy a yacht, you're almost buying a little piece of a personal navy when you get right down to it.
Not without a doubt you are. I mean, it's funny. I mean, on most of these boats, you will have on a 120-foot spirit of tradition, a boat like Scheherazade. You'll have, 8 in crew, more or less, full-time. You've got a chef, you've got a stewardess, you've got a first mate, second mate, deckhand. Full-time, this is the most important guy on the boat, full-time engineer. Then the captain, and as the boats get bigger, the captain's job gets farther and farther away from actually driving the boat. On a 500-ton boat, fully half his job is pushing papers. Yeah, it is. And between having your own crew for when you're normally cruising or when the boat's on charter is one thing. When you take a boat like that in a regatta, and they're virtually now doing float drops on their spinnakers on 160-foot boats, they'll bring another 10 professionals aboard and another 20 guests. I'm going back, actually, way back now, 2001 on Victoria's Strathairn, which is not a huge boat by today's standards. It's only 140 feet. We got through Antigua Classics, and the owner looked at me, and I wasn't even focused on this because I'm driving the boat. And Alistair looked and said, Hank, we've had 55 people aboard all week. I think we made 1,500 sandwiches. Unbelievable. And big boats do. They drink up a whole crowd of people. But you're right. It's a Navy.
Yeah, interesting.
It's a whole different world. Now, one place one can see a lot of these big boats all at one time is in the bucket regatta, and you had a lot to do with that. Why don't you talk about that?
That's a fun event. It really started out in Nantucket with Nelson Doubleday and a couple guys sitting at 21 Federal, one of the elegant watering holes in the waterfront in Nantucket. They got into a bit of a rum squall and started talking bragging rights and whose boat was fastest. Nelson grabbed this, it was a wine bucket where they had some Chardonnay in there. He said, we'll race you in the morning. We'll call it the Nantucket Bucket, and here it is. They went out the next day, 6 boats, raced around Nantucket Sound. I think their recollection is foggy as to who actually won, but they had a heck of a good day. And that became the first Nantucket Bucket. Excuse me, about in the early 90s, my 2 partners, Tim Lockridge and Ian Craddock, set up the first St. Bart's Bucket. And they got a few of the mega yachts of the day, 100-footers, got them together, and they would do a bit of a rendezvous, play golf on one island, then sail over to St. Bart's. One year they actually had a Le Mans start. They had about 600-footers out in the anchorage, and the rules were you had to take your tender ashore. The first mate, or the most likely guy, had to toss off a daiquiri and then swim back to the boat. Once they got there, the boats had to get underway without using their engine, sail around back to the anchorage around the island, drop their anchor, put the skipper or owner in the tender and run them back ashore to go claim the prize. One might look, they only did that once for a very good reason, because they forgot that while they're going around the island, the anchorage filled up with a bunch of little boats.
Oh, no.
Nobody got run over but Mr. Cabani, the owner of, I'm blanking out the name of his boat. He ended up on the tender. That tender hit the beach so fast, he tumbled right out, rolled around the sand and said, "I'll take my prize, please." Now, things have gotten a lot safer since then, and it's been necessary. That's always been a rollicking and fun event. In those days, there were 5 to 6 boats every year. Between 2004 and now, now we got almost 40 boats. A couple of years ago, we did have 40 boats on the starting line, and these are boats between 100 and 300 feet long, racing hell-bent for leather around the island. Mm-hmm. Pretty exciting.
Yeah. Is there a website for people?
We've learned to be safe.
Is there a website for people to see pictures of that, Hank?
Oh, yeah. That's bucketregattas.com. There's some amazing photography there.
Yeah.
I would advise anyone to go and peruse it. I'd say we're really, the photographers, we provide a photo-rich environment, you might say.
We are about 3/4 of the way through Boat Talk this morning. Alan Sprague, Mike Joyce sitting there this morning. Tom Groening from the Working Waterfront paper, and we're talking to our friend Hank Halsted down in Newport, Rhode Island this morning, a life lived around boats. Hank, how'd you end up getting your captain's license, becoming a skipper?
Interesting. I had actually, as we discussed, I grew up on boats and sailed around boats, did some ocean racing and all that. But I was torn because I went to school in Colorado and really liked it. So I sort of hunkered down there from 1968 until did a bunch of traveling and all in South America, but set up a construction business in Colorado. Did pretty good, and it's funny, all at once in 1978, I just got hit with the itch for the ocean. Said, geez, this place, I was like, geez, I realized I hadn't been barefoot in 2 years, and every time I'd go sit down on one of these beautiful mountains, I'd sort of get a thorn in my butt. And it was a little bit like the song about the lemon tree, very pretty but impossible to eat. I just got hit hard with this thing and said, I got to go sailing. In a 3 months' time, I sold my business for not much and got a job for $75 a week running a Swan 43. I ended up ran that boat for a year and then quickly got into the delivery business. While I was doing that, I actually met George Hinckley, Henry Hinckley's brother. He had a nice B-40 named Hahnemann. George and I got along pretty well. He ended up putting me forward for a job on a Hinckley 43 by the name of Megan J.
Megan J. There you go. Yeah, now called Jubilee, if anybody's interested. And so, spring of 1980, you're at the dock in Newport, Rhode Island. You just come back from a charter. The boat needs a little bit of work, and the charter agent sends you some people.
Oh, Jesus, that guy. Yeah, okay, here's a yarn. Interesting one, actually. I sailed in my good friend George Hill, who now owns Weatherly, and he was on a sister ship, Hinckley 43, named Starbright. I'd finished my Caribbean charter season. It was in the spring of, I think it's 1st of May, 1980, something like that. George had finished his season, so we took these 2 boats and we cruised side by each for about a month. From Martinique, ended up here in Newport. They beat me. We had a race from Bermuda to here, so we stopped in the Gulf Stream for a birthday party, so George beat me in by about 4 hours. That was on a Friday night, I think. So we got in after customs closed, and I guess it passed the statute of limitations, so I could say, well, we didn't pay much attention to the quarantine thing because their boat was all tied up, pretty good up and all that, and they were off the bar. So we put our trash all in a big bag and put ribbons and bows on the bag and flipped it into their cockpit with a sign that said, winner takes all. Went and found them at the bar and had a great time. Cleared customs the next morning, walked out Bannister's Wharf, and I was just walking in from customs, and my friend Paul McCaffrey, a local charter broker from McMichaels, said, "Hey, Henry, good to see you. You want a charter to go to Bermuda?" I said, "Oh, they looked at him like he had two heads. I'm like, Paul, I've been here for like 8 hours. But sure, why not? Hook it up if the people are responsible and they want to go to Bermuda. I'd love to sail back to Bermuda." So one thing led to another. Actually, that night, we had a picnic ashore, and then George and I decided to go sail to the tall ships up in Boston, which we did in the 2 boats. McCaffrey reached me up in Boston and said, "Well, this guy may want to do a charter with you, Hank. What's the exact time and date of your birth?" What does that have to do with the price of beans? And he said, "Well, they're interested." I said, "Oh, geez, okay." So these guys, whoever they are, they must be okay. They're interested in astrology. I told them 9:41 a.m. in Manhattan, blah, blah, blah. And tell them, by the way, Paul, tell him we'll get along. It sounds like he's lined up pretty good. So I sailed back from Boston. When I arrived, Paul said, "Fine, you got a deal. You're going to go sailing to Bermuda." I said, "Well, give me a few days," because I had to replace every wire in the mast. Starting to see some cracks in the sledge fittings, and the last thing I want to do is drop a mast on someone's head. So I rigged the boat. We set up the departure date. These guys, everything's locked and loaded. We're ready to go. These guys show up on the dock. Funny thing about a charter business, you sort of never know who's coming. So someone comes down and picks you. And who was it? 1, 4 people showed up on the dock. 4 sort of younger people, another guy a little bit older than me. Now they had these sort of funny sundial T-shirts on with feathers and all that. So that's pretty cool. One of them had a guitar. And they come aboard. We're moving all in. And we're going through, and there's the older guy. He's maybe 40-ish. I was all of about 30, and these other kids were mid-20s. He was sort of running the show, but he alluded to not being much of a sailor, and he wanted to be the cook. He had this little satchel of food, looked like a little black doctor's bag, and it was full of beans and rice and all this stuff. I'm like, "So you be the cook, and that's food, huh?" "Oh, yeah." "Well, mind if I go out and fill in around the edge a little bit?" So, "Oh, yes, no problem." And before we left, I said, "Well, I'm glad you got all those grains out." It's funny, I do a lot of that. I have a Japanese girl. I got it. I started with the chopsticks. I said, "I got some chopsticks, too." He said, "Yeah." He said he brought his own chopstick. I said, "No kidding." "Well, yeah, my girlfriend's Japanese." He looks at me and he goes, "Yeah, my girlfriend's Japanese, too." The guy keeps on dropping these hints. Little did I know, and cutting to the chase, it turns out this guy is John Lennon. I just knew his name was John.
It's one of the most famous men on the planet.
I guess he was, and, just goes to show quite how obtuse I am. I didn't even recognize the guy. One major reason, he wasn't 8 feet tall. He was only about 5'7". But we're walking around the boat, and he kept dropping these hints, and I just wasn't getting it. I had one of those world citizenship flags hanging from my spreader. And he looks up and he goes, "Oh, those guys sent me one of their passports." I'm like, holy cow, I paid $5 for mine. But one thing led to another, and finally, just about before we headed off to Bermuda, I looked at my friend McCaffrey and walked down the dock and I said, "Henry, Paul, what'd you say if I said I think I might have John Lennon on my boat?" McCaffrey goes, "I tell you what I always tell you, Henry, you're full of crap."
Hank, we have a phone call, so I'm going to ask you to put that on hold for a minute, and we'll go to this quick phone call. Good morning. Welcome to Boat Talk.
Good morning. How are you, Alan?
Hi. This is Peter, right?
Yes.
Peter, welcome to Boat Talk.
I was interested in your guest.
Yes, we would like to get. We only have about 5 minutes left, so we'd like to get back to Hank quickly. But Peter, let me put this to you. You've written a book about a boat, and we're thinking about doing a show next month about having animals on boats. So, if possible, we would like to put you off until next month, and we can talk longer on that subject.
Okay.
That'd be very good. Why don't you quickly, though, tell for anybody who's interested, the name of your book and where people can get it.
Well, it's called A Sea Dog's Tale, Tale, and it can be gotten through Amazon or Kindle. And it's about a skipper key that was a really remarkable animal
Yes, I've read the book. It is a very good, and it's a very good sea story too. So yes, we'll look forward to talking with you next month on Boat Talk.
Okay.
Peter Muir, thank you for calling. Okay, let's get back to
Still there, Hank?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I'm still Hank.
Hank, I'm reading a book one day, laying around the shack, Philip Norman's John Lennon, A Life, and we get to the part where John goes sailing. I'm going, hey, cool, and now he's on a charter boat going to, and he's sailing with my friend Hank, and it just blew me away. It's one of the great moments ever reading. From the book jacket, it says here, John was a man of endless contradictions, tough and cynical, hilariously funny, but also naive, vulnerable, and insecure. He was a piece of work. He wrote songs that really were naked about himself, especially after he got to Bermuda after your trip there.
Yeah, he was. You know what? The guy had the courage to be a real human, I think is what you said. Because yeah, he was full of himself and humble. He was all of these marvelous contradictions. And the good news for him, I mean, he was. He took this trip for a reason. He was looking for a piece of himself that he had to rediscover, and the good news is the ocean did for him what it does for everybody. It put him to the test, and really did. I mean, we sailed through some ugly stuff. The rest of the crew got, these guys, it was pretty rough, so they all got real seasick. John didn't. He had a stomach of steel, and the one thing I never did to this boat was I never got an autopilot. So here we sail off into a gale, and after driving the boat for 2 days, I was sort of out of options. And I finally looked at John and said, hey, you got to come and drive this thing, big boy. And he goes, well, excuse me, Hank, I can't do that. I just got these skinny little guitar playing muscles. And I said, John, that ain't the strength I'm looking for. You come on up there and drive this thing. And it was amazing because it was pretty ugly. And Michael, you'd know, I mean, the wind was coming from about 140 degrees behind us at this point. We're careening off the waves. And a jibe would have been pretty close to fatal. It was rough enough. It actually took a Hinckley 3-bow Dodger and flattened it with a wave. It was pretty rough. But this guy, he stood up to it. I sat there with him for about 45 minutes and gave him a little coaching. And he had the feel of it real fast. I went down and passed out as best as a single shorthanded sailor does for about 3 hours. I was still sort of half there. I would have known if he had screwed up. I came on deck and he was a different man. He had mastered it. It was perfect. But good news is, yeah, he got a heavy dose of ocean therapy, and it did. It centered him up real good, is all you can say.
And he landed.
And for me, what a joy to get to spend 7 days, 10 feet from this genius of a guy. We had a lot of fun. We discovered we had a whole lot to talk about.
Too cool. John Lennon, you landed in Bermuda early June 11th, I guess it was, or so. He immediately sat down and started writing songs, became the Double Fantasy record, released a couple weeks before John Lennon, of course, was shot dead on the street in New York City 6 months later in December. Hank Halsted, so great talk to you this morning, man.
Really fun, you guys. Great to catch up on all of you.
Yeah, we only could have done it for another hour or two. But
Could have gone on and on. Thank you, Hank. Well, it's about time for us to say goodbye to the hour has sailed by. Time to make room for Rich Hilsinger coming up next with On the Wing here on Community Radio WERU-FM Blue Hill 89.9, 99.9 in Bangor and around the world at WERU.org.
Support for WERU comes from